The first thing I noticed was the cold. It seeped through my clothes, through my skin, settling deep into my bones like it had been there forever. My eyes cracked open to an expanse of gray sky, clouds hanging low and heavy, pregnant with rain that refused to fall. I was lying on my back in tall grass that whispered secrets I couldn't understand. Where was I? I sat up too quickly, and my head spun like I'd been drinking for days. My mouth tasted like copper and dirt. I touched my temple, and my fingers came away sticky with half-dried blood. A gash, maybe 3 inches long, just above my left eyebrow. The pain arrived a moment later, sharp and insistent. I struggled to my feet, swaying. Endless fields stretched in every direction, broken only by a skeletal line of trees about a quarter-mile to my east. No buildings, no roads, no people, just grass and sky and the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. According to YouTube analytics, 99.6% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. How did I get here? I closed my eyes and reached for memories like a drowning man reaching for the surface. Nothing, or almost nothing. Fragments that dissolved when I tried to grab them. My name was Marcus Chen. I was 32. I lived in the city. Which city? The thought slipped away like smoke. I patted my pockets. No phone, no wallet, no keys. My jeans were torn at the knee, my shirt was missing buttons, and my jacket was nowhere to be seen. I looked like I'd been in a fight or thrown from a moving vehicle, or both. Then I heard them, the voices. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. They drifted across the field from somewhere beyond the trees, faint but distinct. Male voices, laughing. The sound of it made my stomach clench with a fear I didn't understand. I dropped back into the grass instinctively, making myself small. Why was I hiding? I didn't know, but every cell in my body screamed danger. "Should be dead by now," one voice said, clearer now. They were getting closer. "Probably is," another replied. "That dose would drop an elephant. We should check, make sure." My heart hammered against my ribs. They were talking about me. They had to be talking about me. The dose. What dose? I pressed my hand to my arm and felt a tender spot in the crook of my elbow. A needle mark. The memories started coming back in jagged pieces, like a shattered mirror slowly reassembling itself. The office. My office. Chen and Associates, Financial Consulting. I'd built it from nothing over 8 years, sleeping on the office couch more nights than I slept in my own bed, sacrificing relationships, health, everything to make it successful. And it was successful. Until David. The name hit me like a physical blow. David Morrison, my business partner, my best friend since college, the man who stood beside me at my father's funeral, the man I trusted with everything. More memories flooded back. The irregularities I'd noticed in our accounts 3 weeks ago. Small at first, easy to explain away. But then larger discrepancies. Money, moving through shell companies I didn't recognize. Client funds being siphoned off in amounts carefully calculated to avoid immediate detection. I'd confronted him. Just yesterday, 2 days ago. Time felt strange and slippery. I'd shown him the evidence I'd compiled, told him I was going to the authorities. David had looked at me with those earnest blue eyes and said he could explain everything. Asked me to meet him for a drink to talk it through, for old time's sake. One conversation before I threw away our friendship and destroyed what we'd built together. I'd agreed. God help me, I'd agreed. The voices were closer now. I could hear footsteps swishing through the grass. "Fan out! He couldn't have gone far!" I crawled toward the tree line, staying low, my head pounding with each movement. The tall grass provided cover, but not for long. I could see them now, 3 figures moving across the field in a loose line. One of them was David. Even at this distance, I recognized his gait, the way he moved with that easy confidence that had once made me feel safe and now made me want to vomit. He was wearing expensive hiking boots and a jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. My money, I realized. He was wearing my money. The other 2 were strangers, big men with a kind of casual brutality in their movements that suggested violence was just another Tuesday for them. I made it to the trees and kept moving, putting distance between us. My legs felt like rubber, and my vision kept blurring at the edges, but pure adrenaline drove me forward. Behind me, I heard a shout. "There! Movement in the trees!" I ran. The forest was dense and dark, and I crashed through it like a wounded animal, branches tearing at my face and arms. I could hear them behind me, crashing through the undergrowth, calling to each other. They were faster, stronger, not drugged and beaten. They were going to catch me, unless I was smarter. I veered left, running parallel to a small creek I'd nearly fallen into, then doubled back, moving as quietly as I could. I found a dense thicket of brambles and squeezed myself into it, ignoring the thorns that tore my skin. I controlled my breathing, making myself silent, invisible. They passed within 20 feet of me. "Lost him," one of the goons said. "Fuck." "Split up," David's voice, calm, controlled, the voice of a man solving a business problem. "He's weak, disoriented, he won't get far, and there's nowhere to go anyway. We're 15 miles from the nearest town. What if someone finds him? Then we deal with it. But look around, Tony. Who's going to find him out here?" They moved on, their voices fading into the distance. I waited, counting my heartbeats. 100, 200, 300. When I was sure they were gone, I extracted myself from the brambles and stood on shaking legs. 15 miles. I could walk 15 miles. I had to. But as I started moving, a different thought crystallized in my mind. Cold and hard as diamond. David thought I was going to die out here. He'd drugged me, dumped me in the middle of nowhere, and come back to make sure I was dead. He'd stolen my company, my money, and now he was trying to steal my life. I wasn't going to run, not anymore. I was going to make him pay. The walk took me 2 days. I followed the creek downstream, drinking the water and hoping it wouldn't make me sick. I ate berries I wasn't entirely sure were safe, and spent the first night shivering under a fallen log. My head wound got infected, and fever came and went in waves. But the anger kept me warm. The rage kept me moving. By the time I stumbled onto a rural highway and flagged down a pickup truck driven by a weathered farmer who asked no questions, I had a plan. The farmer dropped me at a bus station in a town called Millfield, population 3,000. I told him I'd been hiking and gotten lost, and he seemed to accept this even though I looked like I'd crawled out of a grave. I asked to borrow his phone and called the one person I knew would help me, no questions asked. Rachel answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello? It's Marcus." Silence. Then, "Oh my God, Marcus, everyone's been looking for you. David said you..." "David tried to kill me." Another silence, longer this time. Rachel had been my assistant for 6 years. She was sharp as a knife and loyal to a fault. If anyone could help me, it was her. "Where are you?" I told her. She said she'd be there in 4 hours and told me to stay out of sight. I bought a cheap hoodie at a thrift store and a prepaid phone at a gas station, using change I'd bummed off sympathetic strangers. Then I sat in the back corner of a diner, drinking coffee and planning my revenge. Rachel arrived exactly 4 hours later, driving her beat-up Honda with the broken air conditioning. She took one look at me and her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't ask questions. She handed me a duffel bag. Clothes, cash, first aid kit, and your laptop backup. I grabbed it from your apartment. You're an angel. I'm an accomplice, she said. Now tell me everything. I did. As we drove back toward the city, I laid it all out. The embezzlement I'd discovered, the confrontation with David, the drink he'd bought me at the Madison, our usual spot, how the world had started spinning after the second sip, waking up in that field. He's been telling everyone you had a breakdown, Rachel said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Said you'd been acting erratic, paranoid. He filed a missing persons report 2 days ago. Very concerned business partner looking for his troubled friend. Perfect cover for making me disappear. The police found your car at the Madison. Keys in the ignition. They think you wandered off in a fugue state. I laughed, a sound without humor. He's thought of everything. So what do? We go to the police with what you know, right? I shook my head. With what evidence? David's had days to cover his tracks. By now, he's probably altered the financial records, created a paper trail that makes me look like the embezzler. It would be his word against mine, and I'm the one who supposedly had a mental breakdown and disappeared. So what then? We get proof, and then we destroy him. We holed up in a motel outside the city, and I spent the next week buried in my laptop. Rachel brought me files, documents, anything she could smuggle out of the office without arousing suspicion. I barely slept. My head wound healed slowly, leaving a scar I knew I'd carry forever. David had been clever, but not quite clever enough. He'd hidden his tracks well, routing the stolen money through shell companies and offshore accounts. But he'd made mistakes, tiny ones, a timestamp that didn't quite match, a transfer that went through minutes after a board meeting where he'd been present, digital breadcrumbs that someone who knew what to look for could follow. I followed them. The picture that emerged made me sick. David hadn't just stolen from the company, he'd stolen from our clients, pension funds, retirement accounts, people who'd trusted us with their life savings. And it went back not months, but years, almost from the beginning of our partnership. Everything we'd built together had been a lie. I traced the money to a web of accounts, eventually leading to a single large account in the Cayman Islands. $15 million. That's what my life, my work, my trust had been worth to him. $15 million. But I also found something else. Communication between David and a woman named Melissa Torrens. From the emails, it was clear they were in a relationship. They were planning to leave the country together once he'd dealt with the Marcus problem permanently. The emails were encrypted, but David had used a simple password. The same password he'd been using since college, Blue Dog 2013, named after his childhood pet. I downloaded everything, encrypted it, stored it in 3 separate secure locations. Then I made my move. I started small, anonymous tips to the SEC, carefully worded emails to our largest clients, suggesting they might want to audit their accounts. I didn't reveal myself, not yet. I just planted seeds of doubt. Within days, David was scrambling. Rachel kept me updated. He was working late, having hushed phone conversations, looking stressed. The board had started asking questions. I waited. Patience is a weapon, too. Then, 2 weeks after I'd crawled out of that field, I walked into a police station and filed a report. Attempted murder. I had the needle mark, though it had mostly healed. I had the head wound. I had the testimony of the farmer who'd picked me up. I had Rachel as a witness to my state when she'd found me. The detective who took my statement was skeptical at first, but I was calm, detailed, and consistent. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. And you think your business partner did this? I know he did, and I can prove he had motive. I gave them enough of the financial crimes to pique their interest. Not everything. I was saving that. They brought David in for questioning. He denied everything, of course, expressed concern for my mental state, suggested I might have harmed myself, and created a paranoid delusion to explain it. He was smooth, convincing, sympathetic. But I'd anticipated this, because while they were questioning David, the evidence I'd compiled was being delivered to the FBI, the SEC, and 3 major newspapers, all simultaneously, all with detailed documentation of the embezzlement, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, everything. I'd also sent a copy to every client of Chen and Associates, along with a personal letter explaining what had happened and offering my cooperation in helping them recover their funds. The story hit the news that evening. By morning, it was national. David was arrested at his apartment, where they also found Melissa packing suitcases and 2 first-class tickets to Grand Cayman. The 2 men who'd helped him dump me in that field were arrested within 48 hours. One of them flipped immediately, giving a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecution's case was airtight. David went to trial 9 months later. I testified for 4 hours, walking the jury through the betrayal, the evidence, and that night at the Madison. The night my best friend had looked me in the eye, smiled, and handed me a poisoned drink. When I described waking up in that field, hearing their voices discussing whether I was dead, several jurors were crying. David's lawyer tried to paint me as a vengeful partner, someone who discovered his own crimes, were about to be exposed, and had fabricated an elaborate frame job. But the evidence was overwhelming: the money trail, the emails, the confessions from his accomplices. The toxicology report showing I'd been drugged with a combination of Rohypnol and a sedative strong enough to stop my heart if I'd received a full dose. They'd meant to kill me. They'd just underestimated my tolerance or miscalculated the dosage. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: embezzlement, fraud, attempted murder. I was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. David turned to look at me, and for just a moment the mask fell away. I saw pure hatred in his eyes. I smiled at him. 25 years to life, the judge said. I walked out of that courtroom into bright sunshine. Rachel was waiting on the steps, and when she saw my face, she knew. "It's over," I said. She hugged me, and I let myself feel something other than rage for the first time in months. Relief, exhaustion, something that wasn't quite happiness but was close enough. The aftermath took years to fully resolve. I helped the FBI trace and recover most of the stolen funds. Not all of it could be retrieved, and some clients never got back everything they'd lost. I set up a victims' compensation fund using what remained of my personal assets. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Chen and Associates was dissolved. I couldn't rebuild it, couldn't put my name on something that had been so thoroughly corrupted. Instead, I started something new, smaller, more focused on helping people protect themselves from the kind of predator David had been. Rachel came with me. She said someone had to keep me from working myself to death. I still think about that field sometimes. The cold, the gray sky, the voices drifting through the grass. In my darkest moments, I wonder if something in me died out there and never came back. The version of me that trusted easily, that believed in the goodness of people, that thought friendship meant something sacred. But I also think about David, sitting in a cell, 23 hours of every day, to think about the friend he'd betrayed, the life he'd thrown away for money. And I think about how I'd crawled out of that field, half dead and abandoned, and turned that abandonment into his downfall. Revenge is supposed to be hollow, empty. The old saying goes that when you seek revenge, you should dig 2 graves. But I don't feel hollow. I feel like I survived. More than that, I won. 5 years after the trial, I received a letter from David. It had been screened by prison authorities, and half of it was redacted, but the meaning was clear enough. He was sorry, he said. He'd made terrible choices. He wanted my forgiveness. I read it once, then fed it to my office shredder. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. It belonged to the clients he'd robbed, the employees who'd lost their jobs when the company collapsed, the family members who'd trusted their retirements to us. It belonged to the farmer who'd given a desperate man a ride without asking for anything in return. It belonged to Rachel, who'd risked everything to help me. It didn't belong to me, and I didn't want it anyway. I had something better than forgiveness. I had justice. And I had my life, the one David had tried to take from me in that field. Sometimes, late at night, I touched the scar above my eyebrow, a reminder of what I survived, what I endured, what I overcame. I woke up in the middle of nowhere, couldn't remember how I got there, and heard the voices of men who wanted me dead. But I didn't die in that field. David did. The man he was, the life he'd built on lies. All of it died while I lived. And that's the best revenge of all.